Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been karting since I was 12, and after 6 years of dedication, I was finally at the top of my game. The championship was within reach. Just one more race to secure my spot. Me and my two best friends were the top 3 in our league, and winning this race meant a chance to compete in Italy and move up to Formula Renault. Pretty much a dream come true for any young racer. We were part of this amazing team run by my friend's dad. He'd invested everything in us, even got us these professional racing simulators to practice on. The day before the big race, we were all gathered in the garage, analyzing data and running practice laps on the simulators while our karts were outside after the practice rounds. That's when this rich kid, let's just call him the spoiled brat, showed up. Everyone knew about him. His dad's money kept him in the league despite being the dirtiest driver around. He was 5th in the championship, but usually stayed out of our way. Well, until that weekend. During practice, this guy starts playing dangerous games. He'd slow down, wait for us to catch up, then try to ram us off the track. We managed to dodge him, but my friend wasn't so lucky. The spoiled brat clipped his kart and broke the front axle. We immediately stopped our kart safely and ran to check on our friend. I was furious. I yelled at him, demanding to know what was wrong with him and pointing out that he could have seriously hurt my friend. The spoiled brat just shrugged it off, claiming it was just an accident and that these things happen in racing. I shot back that we both knew it was no accident. We got our friend to the paramedics and took his damaged kart back to our team's tent for repairs. Then this guy has the nerve to come over, wearing this smug smile. He tried to apologize for what happened back there, but his smirk gave away his true feelings. My blood was boiling, but we ignored him and focused on qualifying. Looking back, that was my mistake. I should have checked my kart thoroughly before getting back on track. The first 2 corners were fine. You can take them flat out without braking. But when I hit the 3rd corner at about 62 miles per hour and pressed the brake pedal, nothing. I thought maybe my foot was still on the gas pedal. It's a habit to keep it there for faster acceleration out of corners. But no. I took my foot completely off the gas and stomped the brake. Still nothing. By then, it was too late. I slammed into the barrier, and my left wrist exploded with pain. The track marshal rushed over when it was safe. He kept asking if I could hear him, checking if I was okay, and trying to figure out what had happened. I could barely speak through the pain. They got me out of the cart, into an ambulance, and straight to the hospital. Diagnosis: fractured wrist, 9 to 10 weeks of recovery, championship dreams shattered. But here's where it gets interesting. My family pressed charges for attempted murder, and we had a secret weapon, my friend's GoPro. He'd left his helmet on his kart seat while his dad was fixing the axle, and the camera was still recording. It caught everything. The spoiled brat sneaking up to my kart with garden pruners, cutting the brake lines, then coming over to give that fake apology. Our lawyer said it was all we needed. 2 days later in court, we won. The spoiled brat lost his international karting license permanently and got sent to juvenile detention for attempted murder. But that wasn't enough for me and my friend. We waited until nobody was around, then we completely sabotaged his kart, cut the brake lines, destroyed the gas system, wrecked the radiator, and stuffed his brake cooling system with Play-Doh. Nobody ever knew who did it. Well, until now. My wrist healed up eventually, and while I missed that championship, the league organizers reviewed the season results given the circumstances. They ruled that the spoiled brat's actions had unfairly interfered with the championship, and based on my previous points and performance, they awarded me a wild card entry to compete in Italy anyway. I heard the spoiled brat's dad couldn't buy his way out of this one, and his son spent a good chunk of time in juvenile detention. His racing career was over before it really began, and we all made it to Formula Renault and we're still racing together. I've been working as a mechanical engineer for the past 15 years, and one thing that's always been a constant pain is finding the right hardware for my projects. Most big box stores carry basic stuff, but when you need something specific like a tiny M2 Allen screw, you're usually out of luck. That's why I was thrilled when I discovered this small locally owned hardware store near my office. I started going there regularly during my lunch breaks, picking up parts for both work and my home projects. What caught my attention wasn't just their impressive selection, it was how organized everything was. The fastener section was remarkable. Every single nut, bolt, and screw was exactly where it should be. I'd never seen anything like it. One evening, while checking out some specialized screws I needed for a robotics project, I complimented the manager at the counter about how perfectly organized their fastener section was. To my surprise, she started laughing and told me I wouldn't believe the story behind it. She went on to tell me how the section used to be a complete disaster. Customers would constantly mix up items, put things back in the wrong spots, and it was a nightmare to maintain. The manager explained that none of their employees wanted to organize it, and honestly, she couldn't blame them. It was tedious work. But then something strange started happening. They'd come in and find everything perfectly sorted. At first, they thought one of the employees was doing it secretly, but everyone denied it. They started joking about having a bold fairy visit their store. The manager then told me how one day she caught their mysterious helper in action. She described how she noticed a teenage boy meticulously going through the drawers, carefully moving bags around. When he realized he'd been spotted, his whole body tensed up. The teen mumbled a timid apology and turned to leave, but the manager quickly stopped him. She explained that while she appreciated his help, he couldn't work there unless he was actually employed by the store. She asked him to return with a parent, and he shyly agreed. The boy left, and the manager wasn't sure if he'd return. But about an hour later, he came back with his mother. The teen looked like he was about to face a firing squad, while his mother seemed ready to apologize for her son's behavior. The mother apologetically explained that her son was autistic and had a passion for organizing things. She told them how he always noticed when things weren't in their proper place during shopping trips. She emphasized that he didn't get upset about the disorganization. He simply enjoyed putting things in order. The manager acknowledged this but explained that for insurance and legal reasons, he couldn't work in the store unless he was an actual employee. The teen's eyes started welling up with tears, thinking he was in trouble. That's when the manager surprised them both by asking what hours he'd like to work, pulling out an application form and a store uniform polo shirt. The teen burst into tears, happy ones this time, while his mother started laughing in relief. 2 years later, the family had to relocate across the country for the mother's job. When the teen handed in his notice, the store owner took it upon himself to help. He spent hours researching hardware stores in their new city, looking for one that matched their store's values. When he found the perfect place, he personally called them. The owner didn't just give a recommendation. He spent nearly an hour telling them about this amazing young man who had transformed their store. He explained how the teen had created a completely new organizational system that they still used, how he'd trained other employees, and how customer satisfaction had skyrocketed because people could finally find exactly what they needed. The store in the new city hired him on the spot. They even created a special position for him, Inventory Systems Specialist. He'd implemented his organizational system there too, and they'd seen their sales increase by 30%. Now, whenever I visit the original store, everything is still kept in perfect order. The employees maintain his system religiously, and they still affectionately refer to him as their Bolt Fairy. Some of them even got together and made a small plaque that hangs in the fastener section, organized with love by our Bolt Fairy. I was always the quiet kid in school, you know? The one who sat at the back of the class, drew in their notebook, and mostly kept to themselves. My parents' divorce when I was 12 didn't help either. I retreated even further into my shell after that. But life has a funny way of pushing people together sometimes. That's how I ended up becoming friends with him. Let's just say he was the complete opposite of me. Captain of the debate team, always surrounded by people. The kind of guy teachers loved. Our moms worked together at the local bank, and one day, His mom suggested we hang out since we were the same age. When my mom first suggested it, I told her I didn't think it was a good idea, explaining that he was different from me. She encouraged me to give it a chance, mentioning that his mom said he was really into video games too. Turned out she was right. The first time we hung out, we spent 6 hours straight playing video games. He introduced me to his online friends from another high school, and suddenly I had this whole group of people who actually wanted to play games with me. When COVID-19 hit, our gaming sessions became an everyday thing. We'd spend countless hours on Grand Theft Auto 5, talking about everything and nothing. Our dads even met once. My divorced dad and his divorced dad actually got along pretty well. But then senior year happened. The change was gradual at first. Missed calls, declined game invites, short responses in our group chat. I noticed he started hanging out with a different crowd at school, the kind that always seemed to be getting into trouble. One day, I decided to confront him about it. I approached him asking if we could talk. He turned around with a cold look and demanded to know what I wanted. When I mentioned that we barely talked anymore and asked if everything was okay, he called me a witch and told me to leave him alone. Later that night, he called me. His message was clear and cruel. We weren't friends anymore, and I wasn't to talk to him, message him, or even look at him at school. I was hurt, but I respected his wishes. Then came the message that changed everything. Our old gaming group had made a separate chat after he ghosted all of us. Best friend sent a message that made my blood run cold. He explained that his little sister was covered in bruises, revealing that our former friend had threatened to assault her if best friend reported a video of him smoking weed. The others were too scared to do anything. He had threatened to beat up best friend if anyone went to the police. Then he came to me personally with a chilling threat. If I told anyone about this, my sister would get hurt next. He made sure to remind me that he knew where I lived. I couldn't sleep that night. My sister is my world. She's the one person who helped me through our parents' divorce, who always believed in me. But I also couldn't let him hurt more people. I made an anonymous police report that night, attached all the threatening messages, the group chat screenshots, everything. The next day I got called to the principal's office. There were police officers there, along with my old gaming friends. They'd arrested him, not just for the weed, but for making written threats. His new friends got arrested too. When I had to testify in court, I looked him straight in the eye the whole time. He got sentenced to juvenile detention for a year and a half, plus community service and mandatory rehab. We moved away after that. My mom cut all contact with his mom. He's still doing his community service hours. My gaming friends and I still play together, though now we're more careful about who we let into our group. And my sister never found out about the threats. She's in college now, studying psychology, wanting to help troubled teens. I guess some good came out of all this after all. I've been in retail for over a decade now, working my way up from a sales associate to an assistant manager position at one of the biggest high-street retail chains in the city. The job itself wasn't bad. I actually enjoyed helping customers and training new staff. But corporate had this brilliant idea last year to eliminate the store manager position entirely and replace it with 4 assistant managers who would run the store together. On paper, it sounded great. Equal responsibility, shared decision-making, no hierarchy. In reality, it was a mess, especially because of one assistant manager who seemed to think she was secretly promoted to supreme leader of the universe. Here's the thing about me. I'm usually pretty easygoing. I don't get into workplace drama, I do my job well, and I go home. But this assistant manager, let's just say she had a special talent for getting under everyone's skin. Every single morning meeting became her personal stage to criticize everyone else's work. If you arranged the display, she'd rearrange it. If you wrote up the daily tasks, she'd rewrite them. If you breathed, well, you get the idea. The other 2 assistant managers and I had learned to just roll our eyes and get on with our day. Then came the rotas situation. Our area manager asked each of us to create a weekly schedule so we'd have a month's worth of rotas prepared in advance. Simple enough task, right? Not with Miss Supreme Leader around. Throughout the week, she kept hovering around my desk, First, she asked me if I had completed my rota yet. I told her I was still working on it. 2 hours later, she came back to tell me that I should really get started since everyone else had finished theirs. I just thanked her for the reminder and said I'd get to it. Another 3 hours passed, and she returned to ask if I needed help understanding how to make a proper rota, suggesting I might be struggling with the task. I wanted to tell her where she could stick her proper rota, but instead I just smiled and assured her I had it under control. What she didn't know was that I was cooking up a little plan. I waited until the very last day when all 4 of us were in the store together. I went into the office early and created 2 rotas. The first one was my actual schedule, perfectly planned and organized. The second one, an exact copy of Supreme Leader's rota. I showed my duplicate to the other 2 assistant managers, who immediately caught on to what was about to happen. They could barely contain their grins. Lunchtime rolled around and we gathered in the office for our rota review meeting. As expected, Supreme Leader insisted on going first. She announced that she had created what she believed was the most efficient schedule and proceeded to walk us through it. We all nodded along as she explained her supposedly perfect rota. Then came the second assistant manager's turn. Supreme Leader immediately criticized it, pointing out that the break times weren't optimally distributed and complained about having too many people scheduled for Tuesday morning. She insisted it needed serious revision. When the third assistant manager presented their rota, Supreme Leader dramatically sighed and declared that the weekend coverage was completely wrong. She questioned if they had even considered the foot traffic patterns and insisted it needed to be completely redone. Finally, it was my turn. I pulled up her exact rota with my name on it. Supreme Leader shook her head and started listing all the problems she saw. She complained about inefficient shift patterns and uneven coverage, continuing to list various issues for several minutes. After letting her go on for about 5 minutes, I cleared my throat and pointed out how interesting it was that she had so many problems with this rota, considering it was exactly the same as hers. The office went silent. The other 2 assistant managers were biting their lips to keep from laughing. Supreme Leader stuttered, claiming it was impossible. I suggested we compare them side by side. I pulled up both spreadsheets, and her face turned redder with each passing second as she flipped between the 2 identical rotas. She started spluttering accusations, saying I had copied her work and that it was completely unprofessional. She threatened to report me to the area manager. I calmly told her there was no need for that, explaining this was just a little experiment to prove a point. Then I showed her my actual rota. When I stood up and headed for the door, I suggested she might want to fix all those problems she had pointed out in her own rota. The other 2 assistant managers followed me out, leaving Supreme Leader alone with her thoughts and 2 identical rotas, both apparently terrible according to her own critique. After that day, our area manager received an anonymous email detailing Supreme Leader's consistent pattern of undermining her equals and creating a toxic work environment. Attached were recordings of several meetings where she tried to assert authority she didn't have. 2 weeks later, corporate decided that maybe having 4 equal assistant managers wasn't such a great idea after all. They reinstated the store manager position, and guess who didn't get the promotion? And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.